Hurricane Florence.
A lot of people are scared, rightfully so.
Its wrath still being felt 1 year later by thousands across North Carolina.
Every house is abandoned. They were beyond repair. They lost everything.
Tonight, Spectrum News examines the storm, what it taught us about adversity.
I'm thankful to have anything, but I did not have nothing.
As we clean up from Dorian,
no water, a lot of flooding,
and prepare for the next one.
More powerful, more irregular rainfall events.
We take a look back at Hurricane Florence and the lessons learned. Good evening and welcome to Hurricane Florence Lessons Learned. I'm Tim Boyum. We are coming to you tonight from downtown Fair Bluff. It's in the southeastern part of North Carolina in Columbus County, just north of the South Carolina line. About 1,000 people called this place home at the last census 10 years ago, but things have changed. Almost half of that gone. The reason, the Lumber River is just on the other side of these buildings, and they have had two major hurricanes over the last few years. Just a year ago this week, the water was up to my waist, and it was like that for 10 days. 2 years before that, with Hurricane Matthew, also up to my waist for 2 weeks. The buildings, you can see the lines to this day that it's impacting. Now, this town was saved from Hurricane Dorian, but the rest of North Carolina, parts of North Carolina, not the case. Let's take a look at Emerald Isle live at this hour, and you can see where there was tornadoes during Hurricane Dorian just last week. It devastated parts of that with homes destroyed and them dealing with those issues. We will go down to Emerald Isle, get a report from a reporter who's been covering that. We'll talk with the mayor there. And over the course of the next hour, we're going to talk to our chief meteorologist about why we saw so much rain with these storms, and also with state leaders about what we've learned from those past storms and what we can do to better prepare for the future. But in the meantime, here in Fair Bluff, things haven't changed much since those storms. And the residents, they're still trying to pick up the pieces and figure this out and what they're going to do next. One of those is Michael Green. He's with Mike and Mike's Computers. Good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for being here. You've lived here your whole life, right?
Yes, I have. I've been here my entire life.
And so just take us back. Hurricane Matthew was the first that struck. What are your memories of Hurricane Matthew in this town, in particular for your store?
Well, basically, I just remember the day before leading up to the hurricane. Basically, it was a normal day like it normally was. I was here working. I'd leave, I'd left that evening, not really thinking, it was calling for the hurricane to come. And we're an area that have hurricanes here, but just thinking that it was going to be a regular hurricane that was coming through, but little did I know that it was going to, come to catastrophic. I mean, it just was the damage here that was done. It has been very traumatizing, as far as the community, the businesses, it's just a sad thing to see. So I really didn't expect to see this type of damage, because again, it was a hurricane that I mean, it was damage that I've never seen in my lifetime here.
And then it happened with Hurricane Florence again. What is it like being in here? When you look around and you see, there's still computers laying around. What's it like to see this?
For me, it's always an emotional time, because I have so many memories here of the community coming in, and just the people. I live here, and I know a lot of the community in which would come visit. So when I come here, it's always a sad time for me, because just looking around. I mean, if you just look around, it looks very, it's just sad, And so for me, every time I come in here, after Matthew, and it took me a while before I even came back to visit, because it was so emotional, for me to come back to see, my family comes here, my friends, the community, customers, and it's just a sad thing to see, For me, it just extremely sad when I come in.
So what are you doing now?
I've repaired computers. I recently opened inside of the Sunoco gas station down the street. I have a small area inside of there where I actually repair computers. Now, I always say that, I want, inside of Fair Bluff, I want to eventually reopen a computer store, a storefront again.
Here?
Yes. in Fair Bluff, you know, and it's very important. That was one of the, you know, it was very important for me to open here because I'm from this community, and I always believe that it's important to give back to the area in which you grew up in. You know, I got a lot of lessons here from schools, from the community. My church is here. I just got, you know, so many lessons here. So why not the lessons that I've got? You know, why not give them back to the community as well?
You want that, but are you hopeful for that? There's a
I
lot of
am.
towns struggling even inside of hurricane, small towns. How do you feel about the future of Fair Bluff?
I'm very excited and optimistic that Fair Bluff can come back better than ever before. As time goes on, I I am a little doubtful, but I'm hopeful that Fair Bluff will come back better than it was before. It's important that and I talked about this before, that I hope Fair Bluff is not the forgotten place, to where that, you know, everything goes back to normal per se, and then it's forgotten. But if you look around the community, look around here downtown, you see a lot of I mean, a lot of damage. It's still is with the homes here. They're still abandoned. I mean, you see, I was just going around the community today, and I saw all of the homes. They just were basically still like they were when the hurricane came.
It's like time stopped.
Yeah, yeah, and it's sad. I mean, it's extremely sad. So I hope that the hope is that Fair Bluff can come back better than it ever was before.
Well, Michael Green, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck to you. We hope
Thank
to
you.
come back and see the store doing well again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Michael is not the only one that's been facing these challenges. We'll show you as we walk down the street here throughout the evening. Many of these stores are empty. As I mentioned, it feels like time has just stopped here. Loretta Beniti has a closer look at what this town has endured.
Shop after shop abandoned.
I never thought Fair Bluff would flood.
The troubles that live inside these walls, devastating.
We can't save the buildings. They cannot be fixed and repaired.
You ever get that little ball in there, snatch it up. All right, you good.
Randy Britt owns the local hardware store. He opened a small room in the back of his shop to try to help folks out. But when you step into the front of the store, the reality of post-Hurricane Florence Fair Bluff becomes apparent.
I figured it's going to get maybe an inch or two in here. And then, it just kept rising and rising and rising. And so when it was about that deep, I came in here and I toted out my computers and I grabbed one saw. And I was in shock.
A similar story a few stores over. The local beauty shop that nearly recovered from Hurricane Matthew when Florence flooded it again.
After Hurricane Matthew, I cried for the whole day, thinking about all that money that I had invested that was going to be a lifetime investment for my daughter. But after Hurricane Florence come through, we can't save the buildings.
This small town of Fair Bluff sits right on the South Carolina border. About a half a century ago, it was a bustling community. This is where tobacco farmers brought their crops to drop them off at the warehouses. But as that industry changed, the town needed to change as well. It decided to highlight the Lumber River to welcome people to the community. But this river is what's caused the devastation.
The river's behind these homes. It kind of runs at an angle.
State Representative Brendan Jones's district includes Columbus County and Fair Bluff.
If you look straight, you see how the town just falls down?
He took us out in what he called his hurricane truck to show us around this struggling community.
There's not one business left open on this main street.
Home after home abandoned.
A lot of this was rental property. Nobody ever anticipated needing flood insurance in Fair Bluff.
And in fact, the town hasn't seen flooding like this since the 1920s. Is this whole neighborhood empty?
Whole neighborhood. I think one couple may have came back, but that's it. Every house is abandoned. They were beyond repair. They lost everything. They had no reason to stay. And there's still actually people in hotels right now in Lumberton. September of 18 and people are still in motels.
Fair Bluff suffered a double whammy. Matthew, then Florence. And this town says the relief money coming in to help is simply too slow.
We're broke, and we're going to every avenue we can to get funding from everybody that we can.
But with some relief funds tied up in a budget battle in Raleigh and federal dollars slow to pay out, there's not a lot of options.
I really worry about the next 12 to 18 months trying to survive and just to be a township.
The town, should the money become available, plans to move to higher ground. A major change for this small community, but necessary to bring folks back to Fair Bluff.
And necessary because, as you see, there's paint peeling, there's boards up and still all the windows. It is a challenge for this town to figure out what to do. And there's small towns all across North Carolina that are facing issues like this. Fair Bluff is not alone. Driving down here from the Raleigh area, there were all sorts of towns that were facing those similar kinds of issues moving forward. So what should we do with towns like this moving forward? Should we supply them all the money that they need to rebuild, or should we move the downtowns? Joining us now is Mayor Billy Hammond, who is the mayor of this town. Sir, thank you.
Good to see you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
You are doing fine. How's your town doing?
We're slowly but slowly coming back. It's going to take a long road, and it's been a hard road, but we're going to recover.
So take me back to first Hurricane Matthew. What are your memories of this town we see behind us?
This town at one time was a very booming town back in the Backer time. When Backer left, it dropped down some, but we still had the business in town, and all the business was operating and thriving and moving forward. And then Matthew come in and with about 4 foot of water, 4.5 foot of water, and then it dropped down to about 3 foot of water and stayed here for about 12 to 14 days. And we had a large of our community on the west side of town here in downtown that flooded out, and thank God that our rescue and fire department come in and got everybody out. We did not lose no lives or anything, and so we're on the process of rebounding.
And not just to cut you off there, but so that was Hurricane Matthew, and then
Yeah.
2 years later, Hurricane Florence is coming in. What's going through your mind?
I said, not again. And I said, it can't happen. I said, because the river was dry, the swamps were dry, and I said, there's no way that we can have that much water. Well, the next morning after the storm, about 9 o'clock, it come in, started on Main Street, and it just rose steady to about 4.5 foot. And dropped back down about 4 foot and stayed here about 10 days.
So what was going through your mind and your heart at that time? You've grown up here mainly, right?
Right, I've been on the town council 26 years. I've been the mayor for 6 years in November, and so I've lived here since '59.
So watching these storefronts, I mean, what was going through your mind when you saw this happening?
Yeah, I just say that it's going to be hard to recover from it, and it has. It's been a long, hard road. And then Florence comes 23 months later and hits us again, and I just didn't believe it could happen, but it happened, and we have started moving forward with Matthew process and getting houses moved in and tore down.
Which is important for people to get in their home, but you need people to be able to make a living too. So,
yes, sir.
So what do we do with downtown here? We now have 2 stores. I've gone through a lot of these buildings here. You can see the water lines, it's studs. I can imagine the environmental damage that's in there. What do we do?
Okay, we're looking at moving east about 1 block and buying some land down there and some buildings and making us what we're calling uptown down there. And we're looking to get some funds to help us do that process through the USDA program.
And you think that'll be far enough to overcome floods like Florence and Matthew?
Hopefully so. I don't say it will be, because I will say that I would have never thought Florence would have flooded us like it did, but it did. And it was worse. We got more water from Florence than we did from Matthew.
And so what do you do with this area then? I mean, obviously there's all these buildings here. Do you just destroy them?
Yeah, well, we got a couple options on the table to what we're discussing now, doing with downtown buildings with the property owners.
And so what do you want the people of North Carolina to know, right? I mean, a lot of people are watching this, and some of them high-rise buildings in Charlotte and Raleigh, and you know, the state is urbanizing, right? And a lot of these small towns, even without hurricanes, are struggling. What do you want the folks that are watching this to know?
I want them to know that if they haven't been through this situation, that if they would go through this situation, they would have a different outlook on life and their community.
Do you feel good about the ability to raise the money to move downtown to uptown, like Charlotte has uptown?
Yes, sir. I think we're moving in a positive direction. We've looked at some land and got some options on the table. So.
Well, we certainly wish you the best of luck, sir.
Yes, sir.
Your community, we just talked to Michael Green, who owns a computer store, and he really wants to come back and make this town what it used to be.
He has put his heart and soul into trying to come back and make a business here.
Well, we hope it can happen. Thank you,
yes, sir.
I appreciate you. Thank you for hosting us tonight, sir, too. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you in our town.
Absolutely. We're glad to be here. And one thing that's interesting, just talking to the mayor, the municipal building has already moved down the block. That's because this is the old municipal building. You can still see some of the watermarks. In 2008, this building was dedicated, but you can see the water lines. You can see this is just plywood simply right here. And inside, you can't see it, but it's just studs. And that's what we've seen. In fact, as I looked in some of the buildings before, there's a sign, a press release from Governor McCrory. He hasn't been governor since for some time, obviously. This was a press release from 2016 for a murder in Columbus County. It was still up in there. Another place, a store much like this, BH Small Company, hardware and clothing. It had cards inside. It was like a general store, and you could tell they had been soaked, and they were sitting. It was like it was stuck in time. It's just terrible to watch. So a lot of people are wondering, how did this happen? How did we get so much rain, and how did this happen in towns like this and others across the state? For more on that, we want to bring in our chief meteorologist, Jeff Crum, Gary Stevenson. Guys, I mean, like Wilmington alone, was it 30+ inches of rain? I mean, it's just, it's mind-boggling to think how that can even happen.
Yeah. It is. Florence was such a big rain producer because of the slow movement and the constant pull of the moisture off the Atlantic in and across the area. And then Matthew, of course, years before, 2 years prior to that.
And we've got to look back even 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years ago this month, Hurricane Floyd came in behind Hurricane Dennis and dropped a copious amount of rain across eastern North Carolina, causing what we referred to then as a 500-year flood.
Right.
And we're thinking, okay, that's it. But now we've had multiple floods since then. Matthew in 2016, which is a storm that rode up the coast, like you said, dropped a lot of rain, but it kept moving.
Right.
That was key. But the weather situation over North Carolina, cold front, we had a cold air damming situation.
Right.
It enhanced the rainfall,
and
we had multiple inches of rain. We had feet of rain in a 24 to 36 hour period.
Yeah, rapid period of time. And then with Florence coming through, the heavy rainfall that we had because of the slow movement, it was blocked in on three sides by areas of high pressure, and the storm just really couldn't move anywhere. It was down to 1-2 miles an hour of movement, which is something that we rarely see with the movement of tropical systems. And it rained and it rained, and then the Lumber River flooded again, and it was just, you know, we've been down here all day talking to people, looking around, and you can still hear the pain in the voice of the psychological damage that's been done because of the two hits within 2 years here.
And that's just it. When you look at both storms, synoptically completely different.
Right.
One was slow moving, one was faster moving. We still ended up with the same situation. And of course, when we had Dorian, then we had one on the same path.
Right.
And I'm sure people here, they all, well, we were going to deal with this again. But luckily, the impact was not the same here in the eastern part of North Carolina. It was more of on the coast.
Sure, yeah. At least mercifully, the heavy rainfall stayed further to the east and away. So we didn't have the copious amounts of rain coming into the basin to feed back into the rivers and the streams that would then again perhaps potentially flood downtown once more.
Which basically you always have to remember, when a hurricane is approaching North Carolina, a tropical system is approaching North Carolina, each one has its own personality. I don't want to say personality because they're not a living being, but the effects can be different depending on the track and the synoptic weather system that it's moving into in this area.
Yeah, personality indeed. And Tim is back over. We're going to toss it back over to him. Tim.
All right, guys, thank you so much, and thank you for all your work and hours you put into keeping people safe all across North Carolina. We're about to bring in our panel now to talk about a little further what we've learned and what we can expect potentially in the future. We got Mike Sprayberry here, Emergency Management Director in North Carolina, and Dr. Tom Rickenbach with ECU, Atmospheric Professor, right?
Atmospheric Science.
All right, Atmospheric Science. A very impressive title. I can barely pronounce it. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here for such an important topic. Mike, I want to start with you. What's the biggest thing you think you learned, not only from Florence, but Matthew as well, that we were able to put in place, for instance, with Dorian?
Well, I think there's a lot of different things. One of the biggest things that we learned is that We have a state disaster recovery task force that we activate while we're actually responding. And so that we try to get a head start on the recovery process while we're actually responding. We also have things like generator contracts and fuel contracts that we used to depend on other people for. Now we have those contracts in place for ourselves, and we can get those things down to the folks that need it for public safety. I would also tell you that we have now begun to set up large shelters early so that if there's a big evacuation, we're able to handle it.
Tom, what did you learn most from these last two storms and how it might impact us moving forward?
So I think the big message is we need to get ready for more. We've had in the last several years 3 sort of 100 or 500 year flood storms that aren't expected to kind of return more than once every 500 years. Really a better way to think about that is a 500-year storm like Florence, it means that there's about a 1/5% chance that that could happen every year. So that's a small chance, but it means that each year we have to be prepared for storms like that. And as the Earth is getting warmer, the atmosphere is holding more water. It's more conducive to producing more extreme precipitation. In addition to that, storms like Florence and Dorian, slow-moving storms, patterns that we're seeing now indicate that storms are moving more slowly because of the pattern of the jet stream, and that's the wind pattern that sort of guides and directs our storms. That's one reason that Hurricane Florence, as it approached the coast, just basically stalled and worked its way slowly down toward Wilmington, producing those wind and rain effects that you don't see very often.
So I want to ask you an amateur science question, because Lord knows I'm an amateur scientist. We did see Fran and Floyd back in the late 90s, huge storms, and then we didn't see any. I mean, we saw Isabel and whatnot, but it was a long time before we had these storms. How do we know it's not some sort of cycle that might end this year, for instance?
Right. Well, there certainly are sort of natural cycles in that modify the occurrence of hurricanes, and that relates to the currents of ocean water across the Atlantic up to the north to Greenland and returning down. And as the Gulf Stream is a part of that, and as those currents change in speed and in intensity, it can impact how many hurricanes we get over a decadal kind of time frame. On top of that, we have a signal of warming, of planetary warming. And so you can think about it as those natural cycles occur and continue, but it's ramping up toward an increase in the total number of storms. So though both effects are happening, we have to look at the impacts of both the natural cycles of hurricanes. We've had strong hurricanes since there have been people living here over the last several hundred years. We just simply have more intense ones, and that's a reality that we have to live with.
Okay, gentlemen, stick around. You'll be with us throughout the hour. We'll talk more about what the state is doing also to prepare. But we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a trip back to Wilmington to see how they're doing after Florence.
It's a standstill storm. Nobody can do anything but just stand.
I was so scared, I don't hardly know what I did.
Really didn't anticipate that this sort of thing was going to happen.
And this is a live look at Emerald Isle, where they are still recovering at this hour from Hurricane Dorian. We'll have a live report coming up after this break as Hurricane Florence Lessons Learned continues.